When I found myself alone for the first time in 43 years, I thought it was the end of my story. My wife Sarah had passed after a long battle with cancer. The kids lived across the country with families of their own. The house that once echoed with laughter and conversation now held only the sound of my own footsteps. I expected loneliness to swallow me whole. Instead, something remarkable happened. Something I never could have imagined during those first dark months of grief. I discovered that living alone wasn't the punishment I'd feared. It was the gift I never knew I needed. My name is Arthur, and at 68, I learned that the most profound chapters of a man's life can begin in silence. Today, I want to share 9 unexpected gifts that came with learning to live alone. Not because I chose it, but because life chose it for me. And what I discovered might change everything you think you know about solitude, aging, and what it means to truly live. Gift 1. The return to authentic self. For 43 years, I was Sarah's husband first, the children's father second. And somewhere buried beneath those roles was Arthur, the man who used to paint watercolors in college, who loved jazz music, who could spend hours reading poetry without feeling guilty about wasting time. The morning after Sarah's funeral, I woke up in our bed, now just my bed, and for the first time in decades, no one needed anything from me, no medications to organize, no appointments to drive to, no careful conversations to navigate around someone else's pain. The silence was deafening, but underneath it, I heard something I hadn't heard in years, my own voice. Within a month, I'd set up an easel by the living room window. I started listening to Miles Davis while I cooked dinner for one. I discovered that I actually preferred my coffee black, not with the cream and sugar I'd been adding for 40 years, because that's how Sarah liked it. I wasn't becoming someone new. I realized one evening while painting a sunset I'd been watching from my kitchen, I was remembering who I'd always been. This isn't about selfishness or forgetting the people we love. It's about reclaiming the parts of ourselves that we lovingly set aside for others, and discovering they've been waiting patiently for our return. Gift 2. The sacred medicine of silence. The quiet nearly broke me at first. After decades of Sarah's gentle humming while she cooked, the television murmuring in the background, and the constant low-level activity of a shared life, the silence felt like a weight pressing down on my chest. I tried filling it immediately. News programs all day, music in every room, phone calls to anyone who would talk. But one morning, about 3 months in, the power went out during a storm. No television, no radio, just me and the sound of rain on the windows. That's when I discovered something profound. Silence isn't empty. It's full of everything I'd been too busy to feel. Sitting in that quiet morning, I finally felt the full weight of losing Sarah. Not the frantic, overwhelming grief that had been chasing me for months, but a deep, clean sadness that needed space to breathe. I felt gratitude for our 43 years together. I felt peace knowing she was no longer in pain. I felt, for the first time since her diagnosis, genuinely present in my own life. My neighbor Frank, a Vietnam veteran who'd been living alone since his divorce 15 years ago, told me something that changed my perspective. The quiet isn't punishment. Arthur, it's medicine. It's where you learn the difference between being alone and being lonely. He was right. In the silence, my nervous system began to heal from years of chronic stress and caregiving. My blood pressure dropped. I started sleeping through the night, the constant tension in my shoulders, tension I didn't even know I was carrying, finally began to release. Gift 3. Creating home on your own terms. For 4 decades, every decision about our living space was a negotiation. Where to put the furniture, what temperature to keep the house, whether to leave dishes in the sink overnight, what to watch on television. These weren't bad negotiations. They were the beautiful compromises of a loving partnership, but they were still compromises. Living alone meant I could finally create a space that reflected who I am, not who we were together. I moved Sarah's antique dining set into storage, and brought my grandfather's leather reading chair out of the basement. I painted the den a deep blue that Sarah never liked, but that made me feel calm. I filled the kitchen with the smell of the garlic and onions Sarah couldn't tolerate during chemotherapy. The transformation wasn't about erasing our shared life. Many of our photos and memories remained exactly where they'd always been. It was about creating space for Arthur to exist fully. For the first time in decades, my friend Harold, 72, experienced something similar after his wife moved to assisted living with dementia. I kept our bedroom exactly the same, he told me, but I turned her craft room into a workshop. For the first time since I retired, I had somewhere that was completely mine. It felt like coming home to myself. Gift 4. The archaeological dig of rediscovery. Who are you when no one is watching? It's a question most married men haven't asked themselves in decades. We become husbands, fathers, providers, all beautiful roles, but roles nonetheless. Living alone forced me to excavate the man beneath those identities. I started small. I picked up books I'd abandoned when life got busy, philosophy, history, even some novels Sarah used to tease me about being too serious. I began taking long walks without destination, just to see where my feet would take me. I bought a guitar I'd been wanting for 20 years and started learning songs I'd hummed but never played. The revelation came gradually. I wasn't lost without the roles that had defined me. I was free to discover what defined me from within. My friend Robert, 65, went through his own rediscovery after his wife left him for another man. At first, I felt like a failure, he admitted, but slowly. I started doing things I'd given up for marriage. I took a cooking class, joined a hiking group, even tried online dating. I realized I'd been living someone else's version of my life for so long. I'd forgotten what my own version looked like. Gift 5. The luxury of unscheduled time. After decades of coordinating 2 schedules, managing family obligations, and timing everything around someone else's needs, the freedom to move through days at my own pace felt almost revolutionary. I could eat dinner at 5 p.m. or 9 p.m., depending on my mood. I could stay up late reading without worrying about disturbing anyone. I could spend an entire Sunday in my pajamas if that's what my soul needed. These weren't acts of rebellion. They were acts of self-care I'd forgotten were possible. Gift 6. Mental health through reduced performance pressure. Something I hadn't expected. The relief from constant emotional performance. For years, even in the best marriages, there's an underlying awareness of your impact on your partner's mood, needs, energy. You modulate yourself, consciously or not, to maintain harmony. Living alone meant I could feel what I actually felt without filtering it through someone else's emotional needs. I could have bad days without worrying about bringing down the household mood. I could have good days without feeling guilty if someone else was struggling. Dr. Martinez, my physician, noticed the change during my 6-month checkup. Arthur, your anxiety levels have dropped significantly. Are you doing anything different? The answer was simple. I was no longer performing emotional stability for anyone else's benefit. I could just be human, in all its messy complexity, without impact on anyone else's well-being. Gift 7. Relationships that choose you back. Here's the paradox. Living alone actually improved my relationships with others, without the daily obligation of constant companionship. Every interaction became intentional. My weekly coffee with my neighbor Eugene became something I genuinely looked forward to, not something I fit into my schedule. Phone calls with my daughter became conversations, not check-ins when my son visited from Denver. We had real talks instead of just filling time together. Because I was no longer starved for human interaction but choosing it, I brought more presence to every encounter. People noticed. My relationships deepened in ways I hadn't expected. Gift 8. Confidence through self-reliance. At 68, I learned to fix my own leaky faucet. I figured out how to cook meals I actually wanted to eat. I managed my finances, organized my medications, and handled home repairs that I'd been delegating for decades. Each small act of self-reliance rebuilt something in me that I didn't realize had eroded. Confidence in my own capability, not because I needed to prove anything, but because I was reminded that I still could. My brother-in-law, Mike, who'd been living alone since his wife's death 3 years earlier, put it perfectly. You realize you're not as helpless as you thought. It's not that you want to do everything yourself, but knowing you can if you need to. That's powerful at our age. Gift 9. Joy in the overlooked moments. When life slows down and you're not constantly coordinating with someone else's rhythms, you start noticing things you'd been missing for decades. The way morning light moves across my kitchen table, the satisfaction of a perfectly brewed cup of coffee, the sound of rain on the roof that I can actually listen to without having to make conversation through it, the pleasure of reading the same paragraph 3 times because it moved me, without feeling like I'm being rude to someone waiting for my attention. These moments of simple joy had been there all along, but they'd been crowded out by the beautiful complexity of shared life. Now, in the spaciousness of solitude, they had room to breathe. The unexpected chapter. 1 year after Sarah's death, I ran into Margaret at the grocery store. Margaret had lost her husband around the same time and was navigating her own journey with solo living. We started having coffee once a week, comparing notes on our strange new freedom. People keep telling me I need to find someone new, Margaret said during one of our conversations, but I think I need to finish finding myself first. She was right, and maybe that's the real gift of learning to live alone at this stage of life. Not because we're giving up on love, but because we're finally learning to love ourselves enough to be genuinely happy in our own company. The choice to thrive. 6 months ago, my daughter asked if I was ready to consider moving closer to family, maybe looking into senior communities where I'd have built in companionship. I thanked her for caring, but realized I wasn't ready to give up this unexpected chapter of my life. Living alone at 68 isn't what I planned, but it's become something I treasure. It's taught me that solitude and loneliness are completely different experiences. It's shown me that the men who learn to be genuinely content in their own company are the ones who have the most to offer when they do choose to share their lives with others. I'm not opposed to companionship if the right person comes along, but I'm no longer afraid of being alone because I've discovered something remarkable in this quiet house, in these unscheduled days, in this life that belongs entirely to me. I'm still here, still growing, still discovering, still alive in ways I forgot were possible. And sometimes, in the golden light of late afternoon, sitting in my grandfather's chair with a book in my lap and music playing softly in the background, I feel something I never expected to feel again. Completely, authentically happy. That's not the end of my story. It might just be the beginning of the best chapter yet.